rise for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome. Today is May 14th, 2018. Can I have a roll call, please?
Basil?
Here.
Meyer?
Here.
Kraus? Missouri? Here. Gross?
Here.
Whaling?
Here. We have the minutes from April 23rd. Any changes or corrections? If not, is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion made. Is there a second to approve?
Second.
Second. Any questions or motion? Roll call.
Basil?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Missouri?
Yes.
Gross?
Yes.
Whaling?
Abstain.
Is there anyone from the audience that wishes to address the board? With that, we have the reports of the village commissions, beautification commission. Buddy is not here. I don't know of anything. Somebody else does. 4th of July commission, trustee Meyer.
Not much to report. We did purchase the car, and
Sharp car.
Pardon?
Sharp car.
sharp car. I have not seen it in person yet. I'm sure it'll be
I
floating
think it's in
around.
somebody's garage, safely somewhere.
With, I'm sure, a feather duster in the back seat.
I'm sure.
Yes, you're
yeah.
correct. I don't know how to use that though.
Oh, okay.
Ron does that real well.
There are a lot of sponsorships starting to pour in, so that's all I have to report.
Youth commission, trustee Missouri.
Okay, just a few things. With our Mother Sundance, we had another record-setting event with 188 attending, so that was awesome. We did set our calendar budget for the 2018-19 year. We gave away 2 scholarships to the BHS graduating class of 2018. 1 scholarship of $500 for a student attending a 2-year program and 1 for $1,000 for a student attending a 4-year college. The scholarship will be awarded to the students who have volunteered or given back to their community and or will study towards youth-based careers. The scholarship is being handled by the Beecher Scholarship Foundation. And we are also holding a golf cart raffle fundraiser. Tickets are $50 and only 200 tickets will be sold. The raffle will run through mid-June with a goal to profit. We would like more information about, if I can jump ahead, about the tot lot. Do we know anything more about that?
We don't.
Okay.
We're collecting money at this point. We've gotten money from the fire department, fire district, from the village. The Lions have committed, I don't know an amount yet, from
3,000.
3,000. So,
BYC is interested in contributing to that too.
okay,
So
all right,
reach out to Brandy and Terry.
okay. I did receive that email today, so.
Okay. Good deal. That's about all I have for you, Commission, this time around.
Are there tickets available for the golf cart yet?
I think we're getting them Wednesday night.
River Hope commission, trustee Blaze.
The Ribbon of Hope dedication ceremony will be this Sunday at 2 p.m. At the Ribbon. If weather permits, if we do have rain, we're thinking of an alternative site would be the Pavilion Beer Garden as an alternative spot there, because we will dedicate it on Sunday at 2 p.m.
Question, will the Ribbon of Hope Commission then
Disband, and then
disband
we'll
after
turn,
the dedication?
right, we will turn it over to the village, and then bricks can still be bought here at the village and put in from this point forward. That's all.
Historic preservation commission, trustee Wheeler.
We have our next meeting this Wednesday at 6 p.m. We have a new plaque installed at the Women's Welfare Park, which was the old Dixie Dairy that had burnt many years ago. So that plaque is up. We're also identifying other properties that qualify for the next order of plaques. I hope to have a few more members coming up soon, so we'll have to have those appointed. So that ends my report.
Just one question, I noticed Women's Welfare Park was fully mulched. Did our guys do that? Is that the beautification or historic preservation, do we know?
Don't know, haven't heard.
Steve was working in the parks this weekend when I went by there.
He was.
Yeah. He was pulling weeds and there's piles of mulch out there and he was working.
That's it, Jeff.
That's it.
Trustee Basil?
Donna, the financial activities, good morning.
All right, the treasurer's report. The total of the village accounts at this time is $2,266,903. The total of the commission accounts, $195,496.86. The total of all accounts, $2,462,399.86. The total in general, $629,879.94. The total of the commission bills, non-AP payments, $233,581. Nothing out of the ordinary on that. And I do just want to mention in regards to the tot lot, we are going to open a separate checking account just to keep those monies separate. And
Yes,
that's
thank you.
all I have.
Just one comment on the general fund, I know we keep an eye on that. Our goal is on April 30th, we have 500,000 in the general fund. You can see we have 630 roughly. And we spent 50 in reserves for the boardwalk, so we actually are 180,000 over our 500,000 desired for the end of the year. So our retained earnings in general is about 180.
All right, we have a motion to approve the treasurer's report and the report of financial activities for the prior month.
The motion on the floor, is there a second?
Second.
There's a second, any questions on the motion? Roll call?
Whaling,
Yes.
Caprows.
Yes.
Zurich,
Yes.
Kraus.
Yes.
Meyer,
Yes.
Basil.
Yes. Variance reports for the preceding month are enclosed for your review. And the approval of bills for the prior month, we have them here in front of us, and there's some highlighted items. Athletic Outfitters for 60. That just came in. DeForest Medical for 210. Greater Will County Emergency Services for 100. Guaranteed Technical Services for 270. Martin Whalen Office, that's 227.60. Motorola Starcom for 816. And Tri-River Police Training, 790. For a total of 142,344.86. Any questions or concerns?
I have a question about, we had gotten a late to the table bill from COC, our Constituent Outreach Consultants, for setting up the Facebook page. They were supposed to send the bill prior to the end of the fiscal year, and they have not. That was $1,500, and I believe you wanted to pay it out of, well, we've already closed the last fiscal year,
Because
but.
we had the smartphone app in the budget, which we didn't spend.
Right,
So let's just get that 1,500 for Facebook
add that
paid off.
1,500 to the, yeah.
That'd be my recommendation, to add that bill tonight.
Okay, if there's no questions, can I have a motion to approve the bills for prior month for $142,344.86?
You can have that motion if you make it.
Plus 1,500.
I'd like to make a motion for, for the prior month's bills for $142,344.86.
Is there a second?
Plus 1,500.
Plus
Plus
1,500.
1,500.
Plus 1,500, oh.
I will second.
Any question? Roll call.
Basil,
Yes.
Meyer,
Yes.
Kraus.
Yes.
Zurich,
Yes.
Caprows.
Yes.
Whaling.
Yes.
Trustee Reserve?
All right, I'd like to consider a motion of non-objection to Will County for a proposed solar farm on 17 acres on the north side of Corning, half-mile east of Dixie Highway. It's through the Community Power Group. This farm is located east of the new church on the north side of Corning. After review of the enclosed materials and hearing a PowerPoint presentation from the petitioner, the PZC recommended unanimously to not object to the project. An objection would invoke a 3/4 majority vote of the Will County Board for passage.
I believe we have a representative here that shows the same PowerPoint.
Yeah.
Introduce yourself and we'll tell you.
so I'm Nick Mento, I'm project manager at the Community Power Group. And this is just a quick presentation, kind of going over the project briefly and what community solar is kind of all about. So, as was mentioned, this is just south of town, just east of the church down there on Corning Road, aptly named Beecher Son. And so, the reason that I'm sure you all are constantly hearing about solar now is a new law was just passed in 2016, basically requiring ComEd and Ameren and other utilities to install 3 gigawatts of solar, which probably doesn't mean much, but it's a lot of solar. And so all these companies are coming in and trying to develop these farms. And for these utilities to prove that they have this solar, in their portfolio, they basically buy credits from someone like us or an owner of a solar farm. And basically the proceeds of those credits that are generated from when, electricity is generated, those proceeds are used to offset the cost of electricity to the consumer, ultimately reducing the cost of the consumer's electric. And so, maybe a little hard to see, but I guess I don't need to tell you where this project is again. It's just outside of town. And this is an preliminary plan of what it would look like. And the only thing it doesn't show is landscaping that would be in front of the solar farm. And then you see there's a fence surrounding the whole thing.
To give you perspective, if you go to the west, that's the church property on Corning.
Yeah, you can kind of see the lot a little bit. It's on 2 separate parcels, but it's owned by the same person. So I can go back to this if anybody wants more information on it later. These are just some other things that we were both required to do and do part of our protocol. We have a maintenance and emergency plan, decommissioning plan, which I'll kind of go into a little bit later, an endangered species review with the IDNR, landscape plan, and some other engineering due diligence items. And so, community solar gardens, as opposed to utility scale solar farms, which are the massive ones, they're about 15 acres in size, and that can vary depending on a wide variety of things. And basically the farm, it receives a credit based on the amount of energy it puts back onto the grid, which in this case will be the wires that run in front of the church. And those credits are sold back to the community at a discount to their value, which would be the value being your current electric price. It just shows up as a separate line item on your bill. Basically it'll show your electric usage, how many credits you bought, and then your final bill. And the end result, ideally, is a lower electricity bill for subscribers. And so this is a little, I guess, cartoon diagram, you could call it, basically showing that the electric goes from the solar to the grid, and then ComEd would sell these subscriptions to businesses, governments, residences, whoever wants to buy it. And so the next few slides, I won't read this text, don't worry about it, but these are just some rumors and questions that we get commonly from people. First of which is noise. People are usually worried about noise because of wind turbines and all the problems they've kind of caused once they started getting built. But the fact is that the only part of these farms that cause any noise at all are the inverters, which are basically these things that transform the electricity into electric that your house can use. And they only generate from outside. Basically what this slide says is once you're outside of the fence or 100 feet away, you're not going to hear anything more than ambient background noise, birds and all the other noises you hear every day. And it would kind of be equated to something like having a fridge in the middle of a field. Not that would ever happen, but you get the picture. And next is you know, we've had people come up to us and worry about birds getting killed by these for whatever reason, and one of the reasons we imagine is because there are these things called concentrated solar power plants, which are essentially giant towers, usually in like deserts and other really sunny places, and they're surrounded by mirrors, and the mirrors reflect that light into a central point, basically generating steam and generating electric. But solar panels, they don't reflect light. They're meant to absorb light, and they don't have any mirrors or generate any additional heat. So it's not something that's really a problem. And we also plant native vegetation underneath, which, you know, attracts some insects, butterflies, and will end up probably helping birds in the long run. And that kind of brings me to my next point, glare. So some counties have gone as far to require certain maximum amounts of glare when it comes to solar farms. And the reason that is kind of a somewhat misconception around solar, in that they don't create glare because the basic nature of solar is to absorb light rather than reflect it. And so they use dark color materials, they use special anti-reflective coatings to absorb the maximum amount of light to the point where the glare would be similar to a still pond or a steel beam reflecting light, which is nothing like a mirror, I guess you would compare it to. And so basically it's not an issue in the long run. There's not going to be any light reflecting into people's windows or anything like that. Next is residential value impacts. So there were some studies done for some other counties that require these studies to be done, and it's kind of being realized that you know, one big study was done by Cohn-Resnick, which basically looked at property values after a solar farm was built and before they were built, by looking at how much they sold for in I think it was a 5 or 10 year span. And they looked at some solar farms that were much larger than the one that we're proposing, and the basic conclusion was that they had little to no effect to property values, and the only effect that they had, they like to say, is that it quote unquote increased property values, which that was probably just a coincidence. I don't think that would actually happen, but basically it doesn't affect residential property values. And then just a few other things. Get a lot of questions about taxes. This wouldn't cause any additional taxes to the landowner or surrounding landowners. They're going to be taxed based on the equipment installed, but the exactly how they're being calculated is still being figured out by the state. They're trying to create kind of like a standard, because assessors have just been doing, you know, their own thing county to county thus far, and they're making progress, so that should be kind of resolved in the next, hopefully in the next few months. And construction would start around spring 2019 probably, and there wouldn't be any issues with interconnecting, plugging into the grid at that point. It's a relatively simple process, so there wouldn't be any concerns there. And lastly is decommissioning. So we have the typical lease that we have with landowners, and most people have landowners, are 20 to 25 years, usually with the option to extend for 5 years at a time. And so there's a lot of concern about what happens after that lease is over. And so what I try to explain is that if, say, 10 or 15 years down the line, the owner of a solar farm goes bankrupt or for whatever reason goes out of business, the value of that solar farm that's still there is much greater than the cost of actually operating a solar farm. And so say we went bankrupt in 15 years and you don't know, we have to provide a surety, a bond to the county to decommission it, but that likely wouldn't happen because whoever ends up buying that asset, that solar farm, would have no reason other than to keep running it because it's just sitting there generating electricity. The utility doesn't want to get rid of it, and the ultimate owner of this solar farm would definitely not want to get rid of it. But again, in any case, the county and our leases require a bond to be put in place in case anything ever happened like that. So again, not so much an issue. And yeah, that's all I got.
Question, have you approached Washington Township yet?
Washington Township. Yeah, I spoke with. I just left a message from Mike Stanula
Okay.
the other
So
day.
you have to
Actually,
go, you have to go meet with the township board yet?
I haven't yet. We sent out. So Will County has a specific way they want notification letters sent out, and so based on when the county meeting is, and so we sent those out last week. But I've been trying to get into contact with them recently.
Okay, because your hearing is June 5th, correct?
Yeah.
I think that's the same night as the township meeting, which is,
Yeah. We'll. I know
yeah.
in Manhattan Township, we're attending they're kind of calling a special joint meeting of the trustees and the township board before the county meeting to try to, because we don't want anybody to feel like we're trying to get ahead of them on anything, and so we may end up doing something like that where, whether we meet with them outside of a meeting beforehand or something like that. Kind of flexible on that.
No, I was at the township meeting and they were a little surprised you didn't show up, so.
Oh, really?
Yes, they were, and I think they're also gonna require a bond for protection of the road you'll be driving on with all your
Yeah,
materials.
we have spoken with
So they're
the
gonna,
highway
that was one
commissioner.
additional thing they had, so, bring you up to date.
We signed a letter of intent with, can't remember his name, but
Jerry Meyer?
yeah, he's a nice guy. So, yeah, we signed a letter of intent basically before construction. We have to put in, I forget the number value, but a bond to protect the roads, basically.
So last Monday was the township meeting. Well,
I was unaware of that.
yeah, I guess you could not object, subject to the township's action on the project.
Does anyone know what happened with the last one?
County hasn't approved it yet. Until they resolve these tax issues, the county has put a hold on everything.
Is that the one on the east side?
Going to Indiana?
Yeah. This one is actually due south of, maybe a little further west, but due south.
Excuse me, I thought there was one going down at Beecher. I read the paper, everything in the paper was accurate.
I had just heard that they hadn't passed the last, I'm just talking the ones that we've had a say in. The last one that we issued no objection to.
Pleasure of the board.
Well, I mean, technically, he hasn't met with them yet, it doesn't really affect us here in the village, it is more of a township matter. I know that they want our opinion and we should give them the letter of non-objection, but township hasn't really made a decision on this yet. I don't know what kind of questions they're going to have.
Just at the township meeting, I don't think they're gonna object to it from what I said. I think they're gonna require that, and you might wanna give them a call, see where they're at, but.
Yeah.
They're gonna require the road bond.
And if we didn't object to the other one, what would be the basis for objecting to this one?
Well, I had one other question. You call these community solar gardens. How many community solar gardens does Beecher need to satisfy the needs of the community? I guess is a question. You got Borrego's 2 farms, you got this farm. At what point in time do you oversaturate the market with these solar farms? Or are we supplying power to Chicago with these farms?
Yeah, so I think the rules tend to be that you can, for these farms, subscribers can only be, they usually prioritize people within the county, and then technically I think you can, people across in adjacent counties can buy them, but usually it's kind of understood that people in the local community would benefit the most, and then you kind of go out from there. But as for the capacity, technically there isn't a set number for any one area besides the entire state. But after a point, you know, these lines that we're plugging into, they can only handle so much, and that's based on demand. So,
See, the more we approve, the more that it would be harder for us to say no. You know what I'm saying? It's a catch-22 for us. We want to participate in the solar program, but we don't want to be the solar boneyard of the entire state either at the same time. You know?
yeah, well, it's
Yeah.
also, the people that build these farms, eventually, they wouldn't even be coming to you with these, because, you know, nobody's gonna wanna build a solar farm right next to ours on the same lines, because it's gonna be a lot harder to build, it's gonna be harder to get approval from the utility. You know, we have a very set spot in line with their interconnection queue, so anybody that wants to
I
build.
asked ComEd this question, our liaison, and in the June meeting, they're gonna try to bring a specialist to the village board meeting to explain the capacity of the community to absorb these solar farms. There is a limit to how many farms you can put in a grid. But at the same time, I don't want to build a line specifically for these solar farms, and that the entire township go solar farm.
Yeah, there wouldn't be, it's kind of a mixture between what the lines can handle and just how much demand there is, so, I mean, even if you built new lines, it wouldn't really make sense to build new lines if there wasn't extra demand. So unless, you know, the village expanded, you're not gonna be seeing, you're not gonna have solar farms surrounding your entire village. That I can be sure of.
Does anybody have any other questions?
Yeah, do you plan on keeping these facilities, or are you going to build them and sell them?
No, we have financing partners, but we ultimately own them.
Only,
And the lease is what, 30 years or 20 years with 2 5s?
This one, maybe 25 years with the option to extend for 5 years 2 times.
Well, I guess perhaps we can consider a motion of non-objection, of a non-objection letter to Will County for the proposed solar farm pending Washington Township's decision.
Which, I mean, what would,
There's a motion on the floor, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, now questions.
So, I mean, if Washington Township objects, are we revisiting this then, or, I mean, it's just a letter of objection, right?
Yeah, I think if Washington Township objects, they gotta come back.
Their objection.
Yeah, it's a letter of no objection. I mean, first one got approved, let the county, it's the county's thing. They're actually asking for our say because we're within a mile and a half. You know, ultimately, the decision's gonna be down to the county, just like the last one. I think, anytime you talk about green energy and you have an ability to bring that to our community, it's a positive thing, so I'm definitely in favor of it.
Any other comments or questions? You wanna reconsider your motion of non-objection?
Can I consider a motion of non-objection to Will County for the proposed, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, leaving the last part out. Who seconded it?
Yeah,
Okay, okay.
Yep.
Any questions of what we're going on?
So when you say leaving the last part out, we're not.
She's leaving out the Washington Township part,
Okay,
bottom
so
line,
leaving
so
We're just sending a letter of no
Okay,
objection.
that's what I wanted to clarify.
Okay.
Yeah.
Roll call.
Whaling,
yes.
Caprows,
Yes.
Missouri,
Yes.
Powers,
Yes.
Meyer. Yes. Basil.
yes,
Consider a proposal from Tesca and Associates in an amount not to exceed $20,000 for the drafting of a tax increment financing district study. There's an enclosed proposal, and since the process takes several months, we want to get the ball rolling now. I know we've discussed this multiple times about setting up a TIF district, and I think that's something we have to do in order to keep a competitive advantage with our neighbors. So it looks like they're saying it's between 18 to 20,000 depending on the number of meetings required. So I don't know if anybody has any questions or any discussion. No issues? I will make a motion to accept the proposal from Tesca and Associates in an amount not to exceed $20,000 for the drafting of a tax increment financing district study.
Motion on the floor, is there a second?
Second.
second,
There is a second to the motion, any questions? Roll call.
Hazel,
Yes.
Meyer,
Yes.
Kraus,
I will abstain.
Missouri,
Yes.
Caprows.
Yes.
Bailey,
Yes.
Trustee Reserve.
Okay, I'd like to consider an ordinance updating the building and electrical codes for the village of Beecher. The plumbing code is under the jurisdiction of the state, but the village from time to time needs to review its codes for electrical and building standards. The current codes we have now are from 2005 and 2006, and Safe Built, our building department contractor, is recommending we adopt the 2015 codes without a sprinkler requirement for single family. There are also some other deviations to the code that are recommended, and our building inspector will be at the meeting to explain this new code and recommended amendments.
Tom Penke from Safebuild is here tonight to make a brief presentation on the changes this ordinance makes to our current code that we're under.
Good evening. As mentioned, I'm Tom Pankey. I am technically I'm the village's building inspector, and I have been for 2 years under contract through Safe Built. The International Code Council updates their codes every 3 years. We're currently on the 2006 International Residential and Building Codes. It's a very good code, but it's 12 years behind the times. They're coming out of 2018, but we'd kind of like to sit back a few years, let them find all the mistakes in the code before we look at adoption. The 2015 is an excellent code. Certain things have changed in construction that really don't affect us because we already do a lot of them anyway. The biggest thing in the residential code is they've gone from an 85-pound basic wind speed. Now they use the ultimate wind speed of 115 miles an hour. This being in the plains, Florida, whatever, wind speed's a lot higher. We already require the siding of the house to be OSB or plywood, which has given us our stronger exterior walls. So the only thing we'll really be looking at is a few more anchorage. A lot of towns still allow the gray insulation board and just put the OSB on the corners. So we already require braced walls. But the 15 code has a little better in an anchorage. The biggest thing in the building code, in the residential code, is the requirement that all single-family homes require a sprinkler system. I'm recommending that we remove that provision from the code. You're adding, putting in the code, I've heard $7,000 to $19,000 per house for a sprinkler system. So, recommending against that. Another issue that we've had, especially with fire districts, is the engineered floor joists. You'll see it looks like a 2x2 with pressed wood in between for the web, and then another 2x2. In a fire in the basement, those things have a tendency to fail very quickly. So the code, and they usually only do that for large spans of floor joists. The 15 code requires you to drywall the basement ceiling if you're using, only if you're using those engineered joists. The most expensive thing that we're running into right now in residential construction is the energy code. So we're already mandated by the state of Illinois that we have to follow the 2015 energy code, which brings in, now the fact that our houses are so tight, we have to have mechanical ventilation because our houses are becoming sick inside because there's no airflow. We also have to follow the new radon requirements. It'll gather up the radon under the basement floor and bring it up through a pipe up through the attic. So again, the changes that have been made in the residential code are excellent, and I don't think they'll have a major impact on our community. The electric code, one of the provisions that I've recommended that we amend they require all receptacles in the basement to be ground fault protected. I have allowed them to put a dedicated single receptacle adjacent to the sump pit and the ejector pit. They claim it doesn't happen anymore, but when the motor of the sump pump kicks on, it can trip the ground fault receptacle, which means now you've got no electricity to your sump and you don't find out about it until you have a swimming pool. So we don't put ground fault receptacles on refrigerators. We don't put them on sump pumps or ejector pits. So that's an amendment we have. One of the biggest, and I have discussed this with the fire chief, the building code and the fire code now make the fire protection district the authority having jurisdiction over all of our fire codes. It's my opinion that our board is elected to be concerned about the economic development of the community, and ultimately I believe it should be your choice if there's a discrepancy on the interpretation of a fire code. I've had a fire prevention officer in another community that insisted that we have a sprinkler in a building, but yet the water main adjacent to the building was undersized, didn't have the pressure or the flows. I couldn't even put a fire pump on there. So we added fire doors to make exit from the church sanctuary easier, and self-closing fire doors separating the sanctuary from the office area. The fire prevention officer from the fire protection district said, well, we don't recognize firewalls creating separate buildings, but the code does. And they said, well, we don't. So ultimately it should be, again, our board's decision. The fire chief agrees. Naturally, they would like to be the authority, but I work very closely with them. They've helped me out with the nursing home in witnessing inspections from the fire alarm, sprinkler system, etc. And in turn, I've done things for the fire department. They recently upgraded and relocated their electrical service, and my company waived the permit fees. I did the inspections, but we waived the fees. Again, we'll pay back from cooperation between them and us. So those are the major issues that we have. I think we've got them covered. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to try. I know we got about 6 books. I can't go through all of them, but if there's any things that people are concerned about or have issues, I'd be more than happy to attempt to address your questions.
Yeah, nothing? Okay. So I'm actually adopting the ordinance here. Okay, ordinance number.
1286.
1286.
1286, yes.
I'd like to make a motion to adopt ordinance number 1286, updating building and electrical codes for the village of Beecher.
Second.
There is a second, and just with the recommendations of the building commission.
Absolutely.
Agreed. Any questions? Roll call.
Whalen?
Yes.
Caprows?
Yes.
Missouri?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Basil?
Yes.
Tom, I got one question for you,
Yes, sir.
since you brought the nursing home. I've had some people come up to me and ask what the status of the nursing home project is. It doesn't appear that they're finished over there yet. Do you wanna give the board an update on that project?
Yes. They initially worked the addition to the east. And once that was completed, then we had some additional items on the original portion of the building that had to be modified, but we couldn't touch those until we got all the patients moved, or the occupants moved into the new section. So the original dining room is now going to be a I won't call it a workout room.
Physical therapy.
Thank you. Not physical therapy room. We've redone some of the old rooms, so they're still in process on the west side of the building. We hope to have the west side entrances as nice looking as the east side of the building is very shortly.
Yep. Do they need a permit extension from you for
No.
any reason? They're good?
I've taken care of all that with them.
Okay, and can you dispel any rumors about Dunkin' Donuts not coming to town?
Dunkin' Donuts is definitely coming to town. We've had some comments that initially where the double doors were on the north side of the building they ever thought that was going to be the drive-through window. And when they saw it getting bricked up, they thought, uh-oh. Well, if you go one window west of where the doors were, that's where the drive-through is going to be. They want to give them more space to get around the building and make the approach to the drive. In fact, I just issued the building permit for the window, or the menu boards. So yes, it is a nasty rumor. They got, most of their equipment was moved into the building because the interior walls were built around the ovens, etc. So yes, they are definitely coming. The last I was told by the building owner, looking about the middle of June.
Thanks, Tom.
Okay, I have, contrary to what the agenda says, they have 3 appointments to make tonight to the Planning and Zoning Commission as their term expired. Bill Hearn, Phil Service, and George Scudema will be appointed to another 3-year term, which will end April 30th of 2021. I would ask that someone make that motion for the appointment.
What are those three again?
It'd be Bill Hearn, Phil Service, and George Scudema.
I'll make that motion.
There's a motion on the floor, is there a second?
Second.
A second, any questions on the motion? Roll call.
Basil?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes.
Missouri?
Yes.
Capros?
Yes.
Wyler?
Yes.
Trustee Basil?
Consider a resolution adopting an updated personnel manual for the village employees. This is a process we conduct every 4 years, reviewing our policies and procedures for employees' conduct, discipline, payroll, benefits, and other procedural matters. Most of our employees are covered by collective bargaining agreement, so this manual covers those items which are not contained in these agreements, but are important enough to be spelled out. The village labor attorney has reviewed the agreement and recommended it for approval. He is at the meeting, if anyone would like anything explained out of the, he is here.
Tim Weir is here tonight, the labor attorney that went through that.
And I'll be glad to address any specific questions you have. This is typically a 2-step process. The first thing that happens is the administration goes back through the last 4 years, looked at whatever policy changes needed to either be changed or, thinking forward. And some of those things, were already incorporated before we got a draft. Then we, reviewed it in our office to make sure that whatever changes were being looked at, or for that matter, even older material, in other words, just make a legal update kind of thing. And several of those kinds of changes were made as well. In particular, there were changes made to incorporate, for example, a new Child Bereavement Leave Act. You had a bereavement act in there that covered dependents, but it didn't go the full scope of the state statute. So we did the things that, brought that all into compliance as well. Probably the most significant substantive thing is the revision to the insurance, which is following the trend of what's been happening with all of the collective bargaining exercises, one of which we'll cover tonight, but it reflects that as for all of the union folks who are currently getting 100% of their employee, premium paid for, there's an 80-20 split. Everybody now is in that same, sync, from the union side, so the manual has been updated to reflect that if somebody, by some reason, doesn't fall into that category, they would similarly be treated the same as the unionized employees. So we don't have fair-haired children or stepchildren, you know, in terms of, you know, employee groups being treated more or less favorably. Aside from that, I think the rest of it was pretty self-explanatory. Some of it appears to be the kind of thing that you've already been working on. For example, there's a social media policy that's very extensive, but my understanding is you've already reviewed and approved that as of 2014. So again, this was the exercise to get all of those things in one place at one time. We've gone through that, we've made our recommendations to Bob and the administration, and at this point, we think it's ready for your consideration and approval. Or if you have any specific questions, I'll be glad to entertain those as well.
How many employees does this cover total in the village?
Well, it covers every employee, as far as
Absent of
convicts.
the CBA.
If only one.
Well, that's not exactly true. Every contract, and I would have to go back to the specific language, but for example, the one that's going tonight, reflects that in the management's rights, the employer, who is the village, has the right to implement rules and policies and whatever, and unless the contract specifically overrides it with an express provision that talks about that particular topic, the rules and the policies of this manual are applicable to collective bargaining employees as well.
So absent specifics in the CBA, this rules.
I'm sorry?
Absent what's in the CBA that could
Yeah,
contradict.
if
this,
it's very
this is-
express and contradicts, that's correct.
There's also another layer in there, those are department rules and regs. They're covered under Let's Pull, I would assume, correct, chief?
Yes,
So you have your own department regs that the employees have to follow.
That's
Which is
correct.
another layer
right.
on top of this regulation.
Is there like a summary in this packet I missed, or?
There was a cover memo
changes
that
in there.
changes, yeah.
There was changes on that.
And I mean, I'm sorry, hold on a second. I'm just gonna be honest, I was busy, this just came out, I didn't get this packet till today, so I won't be voting in favor, just because I haven't had a chance to read it. I'm not saying there's anything going on. I just haven't had a chance to read it, and I didn't see, if it's in there, I just missed it. A summary of what's changed, so I don't feel comfortable approving.
There should be a cover memo on there that showed all the changes.
Then I just missed it.
So as far as the insurance for all of the village employees, we're talking about every entity that has village insurance, they're all at 80/20 now?
I believe with the exception of one of the administrative heads of the department, that's true, yes.
I got a couple of questions. Can reductions be made in the benefits, such as vacation time or seniority pay, in the policy manual that would be able, I understand it wouldn't affect the CBA would take precedent over that.
Correct.
But at some, okay, so, but at some point, we've discussed this before at board meetings, and that was kind of before, the two most recent CBAs came around. And one was, eliminating seniority pay. You just don't see that anymore. Let's call it what it is. It was a Christmas bonus many, many years ago when it was enacted. That's why it's paid on December 1st. If it was something that was earned throughout the year, or if it was something that was given to them at the start of a year, it would be paid on May 1st. This was always given to employees as a form of a Christmas bonus, and I don't think as a village government in today's economy, Christmas bonuses are really something that should still be around. And the other thing is vacation time. When I'm for employees receiving vacation, but to break it down, if you have an employee that's been here 20 years, they get 25 paid vacation days, 12 paid holidays, 3 paid personal days, and either 6 comp days that are able to be accumulated or 12. When you do the math on that, you're looking at employees almost being able to be off 1 day a week throughout an entire year, working 4 days a week. I don't want it to go retroactive on any employees, but somewhere, at some point, this is not sustainable. Somewhere, you gotta tighten the belt, and you gotta say, moving forward, future employees will be, whether it's a tier 2, you see the state doing it, you see other unions doing it, creating new tiers with different benefits. We cannot sustain this. We cannot. When you look at 96 hours comp, that's 12, plus 3 personal is 15, plus 25 is 40, plus 12 is 52. 52 days off a year. Somewhere you gotta draw the line and say, you can't keep doing it.
Is there a question? I thought I was hearing a question at the beginning. At the very,
Can we change that?
yes, at the very beginning of the manual, it says very clearly from the employee acknowledgement that nothing in here is intended to create a right of contract, all right? Either in terms of their being employed as being at will and whether you can change those terms, or whether the, elements in here are a contract. So you would be perfectly free to, take, action, to modify what's in here. Probably would be better to republish it with the new terms, but you are not bound by way of contract per se. I would tell you though that with regard to vacation, the Illinois Wage Payment and Collection Act, has, specific provisions and regulations that say once you've earned vacation in accordance with what the policy was at the time, it vests, if you will. So that becomes much more like a promise or a contractual right. So if you were to change it going forward, as you've noted, if you wanted to do it going forward, that certainly could be handled, pretty readily, certainly legally, prospectively. But you should, be mindful that, to the extent that some of these things also touch upon state statutes that vest those rights, then what's in there right now is what they can expect to enforce.
And like I said, I'm not talking about any current employees. Look, they signed up, they were hired, they were handed a policy manual that had these numbers in them as astronomical as they are. I don't think you can take something away from somebody, by no means. But I think moving forward, you gotta say, okay. And I have many other ideas, when it comes time to bargain into these, if you change it here first, and then your next collective bargaining agreement comes up, there are things you can do to negotiate to give them to give that up. You could offer employee paid contributions into a supplemental retirement fund, which are extremely popular, and that's where a lot of unions are going these days. They're putting money into supplemental retirement programs, and it's being paid for 100% by the employer. Because what that does is, if you eliminate 2 weeks of vacation from somebody, okay, but over those 2 weeks, say they make $1,200 a week, you're looking at them losing $2,400 essentially in benefits in that vacation time. Well, if you make it up with $1.25 employee paid contribution into there, it's still costing you the same, but what it's saving you is the replacement of employees when they're gone, when they're off of work. When a police officer takes off, right, someone's got to cover that shift. I'm not saying that it would happen, but I mean, you have that ability to negotiate it moving forward. And even if you don't, I still think there should be something in there where you draw the line. What the line is, I don't know if it's a 3-week max or something like that. I don't know, but I just, we were on track to making some changes, like with seniority pay, eliminating, which got turned into that's in the CBA now, eliminating stipends for health insurance and stuff like that. But I think moving forward, you gotta make some adjustments.
Those are all policy decisions and strategic decisions that need to be made in the context of, first of all, I would tell you that I have several bargaining tables right now that are working with two-tiered systems, especially in vacation pay, that got very generous for smaller bargaining units and presented exactly the problem you were. So that's neither uncommon nor is it unthinkable, and unions have to have those discussions all the time. The only thing that goes hand in hand with that is you don't want to put yourself in a position where you become an unattractive competitive employer, for somebody who's, signing up. But again, those are policy decisions and need to be evaluated in that context.
What is the, average? You do a lot of these, correct?
Yeah.
You mentioned starting pay vacation. Is there a law of averages, an arbitrator would say this is fair and reasonable? I mean, where's the line on that?
Well, first of all, there's no arbitrator involved unless it
Well,
gets
if
to-
you're talking, if you were talking about police though, that would be.
Well, if it got to that, if
Yeah.
it couldn't be negotiated amongst their collective bargaining team and ours,
Mhm.
then it would go to an arbitrator, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Tim, aren't most of these things that we're talking about, the time to bring it up is during negotiations? We can do
Yes,
anything
yeah,
we
these
want.
are economic policy decisions as
Yeah,
opposed to,
that's right.
tied to the manual. But the short answer to the original question, there's nothing in the manual that, would prohibit or handcuff the village from revisiting those kinds of, decisions going forward.
And if just, John, just to clarify, you made mention of a Christmas gift. I don't think there's anybody on the board that intended it to be that way. I believe it's called longevity pay.
That longevity, okay, explain to me why it's paid on December 1st.
It's just a policy decision to pay it. They could put it into the pay rather than put it to they could put it with their hourly rate. They made a decision to give it to Christmas. It's not a Christmas bonus, it's longevity pay.
Okay, we can call it what you want, but
Okay, so if we were gonna give it the
I
day
don't-
before Thanksgiving, it's gonna be a turkey pay then.
Look,
You see what I'm
look,
saying? It's
look,
a
no,
longevity increase.
no, because just like vacation, either it's something that you receive after the completion of a year of service, or it's something that you're given beginning a new year of service, which would put the payment date on May 1st.
But you're sort of implying, okay.
Yeah, I know what I'm implying. I know exactly what I'm implying.
And I made my point, it has nothing to do with Christmas, it has to
Look,
do with the
look,
payout.
no,
It has
I
to
don't
do
think
with
anybody
longevity.
here was even on the board.
I realize
or
it.
involved when this longevity pay came about and started within the village.
It came about before I was even here. It was
So,
done.
I'm not making any accusations
No,
or
I
accusing
understand.
anybody here of
I
anything.
understand, but I don't want any misconceptions either, that it's like a Christmas bonus because you use those terminology, it's not. It's longevity pay for time served, for so
Okay.
many years served. It's
Okay.
paid out before Christmas.
Everybody
I will
can
give it to you.
perceive it how they wanna perceive it. So.
Any more questions?
If I could just ask a quick question, I know you just referenced that the type of things we're talking about should have been brought up prior to negotiations. But I do believe we did have a meeting where we did discuss that we may bring up after the CBA regarding insurance benefits, and that everybody should be on flat across the board. So is that not negotiable at this point because now negotiations are over?
That be addressed in the closed session,
Okay.
am I correct? It's part of the new contract. that closed
It will
session.
be part of the discussion with this particular department. I don't
Yeah.
know that I'm familiar with the discussion you were talking about.
Yeah, yes it is.
Any other questions for the attorney? All right, resolution?
2018-06.
I'd like to consider resolution 2018-06, adopting and updating the personnel manual for the village employees.
The motion on the floor, is there a second?
Second.
There is a second. Any questions on the motion?
Yeah, so you're making a motion to approve it as is, no changes for future, as is? Okay.
How long has this been worked on? Like the last month, last year?
Last 4 months, I would say. Every 4 years we do a review of it. And basically the wording of it, only technical changes have been made to it. The substance really hasn't changed of what was in there in the past.
And I have to be honest, mine also did not download, I wasn't able to read it, so I don't wanna vote on it if I have not read it.
Okay, there's an option.
I'm not saying I'm opposed to it, I'm just saying that I need to look at it.
There's an option to table it. I don't believe there's a timeline we have to approve tonight.
You know,
I think,
But the employees
10
are
pages
covered
of
under
it
the old
printed and the
manual.
rest didn't, and I didn't have time to play with it.
Just be forewarned, the employees are covered by the old manual until this new one's adopted.
So you can't make changes in new, with the changes in the new CBA that are different than this.
The CBA is different than this.
So that would supersede, correct?
Absolutely.
Pleasure.
Let's table it.
Okay, is that a form of motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to table resolution adopting the, updating the personnel manual of village employees, for the village employees.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second, roll call.
Basil?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes.
Missouri?
Yes.
Caprows?
Yes.
Whalen?
Yes.
By rules, whatever you wanna call it, this has to come up at our next board meeting. We will see this the first meeting in June. Everybody wants to prepare themselves for that meeting. Trustee Caprows.
Question, because we have a motion and a second on the first,
The same two table.
Same two table.
okay, so we don't have to actually vote on the first motion?
It's table. Okay, and trustee Caprows, you're up.
Consider a motion authorizing the purchase of a 2019 F-250 XL 4x4 SD Super Cab, 6.75 foot box, 148 inch WB wheelbase, SRW in the amount of $40,641 from Curry Motors of Frankfurt. This vehicle is part of the suburban, South Suburban, or just Suburban Purchase Co-op bid process. It includes a plow uplifting by Linco, so the truck will be ready to roll once it's delivered. So I'll go ahead and make a motion authorizing the purchase of a 2019 F-250 XL 4x4 SD Super Cab, 6.75 feet box, 148 inch WB SRW in the amount of $40,641 from Curry Motors of Frankfurt.
There's a motion on the floor, is there a second?
Second.
There's a second, any questions on the motion?
This was the lowest bid?
It's a co-op, yeah, it's a state ride. It's just like the police cars.
Oh, okay.
Just a note, this truck's gonna be white too, not red. It's part of the changeover.
Roll call.
Whalen?
Yes.
Caprows?
Yes.
Missouri?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Basil?
Yeah.
Consider an agreement with HR Green in the amount of $30,270 to conduct a feasibility study and permit process for a quiet zone from Eagle Lake Road south to Indiana Avenue. This is the first step in getting our quiet zone approved by the Federal Railroad Administration, and this process will take several months. This project is in the approved budget. I'll make a motion to enter in an agreement with HR Green in the amount of $30,270 to conduct a feasibility study and permit process for a quiet zone from Eagle Lake Road south to Indiana Avenue.
Second.
There's a motion on the floor, there is a second, any questions on the motion? Roll call.
Basil?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes.
Missouri?
Yes.
Caprows?
Yes.
Whalen?
Yes.
Trustee Missouri.
Consider an intergovernmental agreement with the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning CMAP for the implementation of an LTA grant for an update of the village's comprehensive plan. The agreement that begins the process. Tesca is the approved consulting firm after a lengthy RFP process that was narrowed down to 3 candidates. Once this agreement is approved, the planning process will begin immediately. Staff recommends approval of the agreement, which is either enclosed for your review or will be provided at the meeting. CMAP is working feverishly to get this project approved Monday night, so the work can begin.
I believe our local match is $11,600, we budgeted 13, so good.
I'll make a motion to consider an intergovernmental agreement with the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning CMAP for the implementation of an LTA grant for an update of the village's comprehensive plan.
Second.
Question, it's not to consider, it's to sign an intergovernmental agreement, correct? Any other questions or comments? Roll call.
Yes.
Caprows?
Yes.
Missouri?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Hazel?
Yes.
Trustee Kraus?
Request for executive session to review terms of a collective bargaining agreement with Teamsters Local 700. The union has ratified a tentative agreement between the village and the police officers and our labor attorney. We asked to attend a session to explain the agreement. We will then go back into open session to vote on an ordinance authorizing the village president and clerk to sign the agreement.
That motion?
Yes, make a motion to go to executive session.
Second.
There's a second, any questions on the motion? Roll call.
Hazel?
Yes.
Meyer?
Yes.
Kraus?
Yes.
Missouri?
Yes.
Caprows?
Yes.
Whalen?
Yes.
Obviously, chief to stay and we're to stay.
I gotta turn this thing back on after you come out of executive session?
This way.
I don't think so, usually don't.
They don't have to? So I can put everything away, right?
Yeah.